couple things we need to have, but it was important for us to have a meeting just so we didn't go too long of a stretch without one. So I appreciate you coming. Paul's already started the recording, and I'm looking for any announcements if there is one, and also to make sure we have a quorum present.
You have a quorum.
Super. Is there any announcements that you folks want to have? Brag about your summer vacations or something like that that would entertain us for the next 12 seconds? I see Jim there. Jim, how are you today, sir? You looking good? All right. Well, look, let's move on. Let's convene this meeting. And first of all, I want to ask if there's any adjustments to the agenda. Does anybody have any adjustments? Any emergency business?
There are no adjustments I know of, sir.
Okay, I don't see anybody's box glowing gold, so let's move on from there. We have any comments from the audience? So we have anyone online that you know of, Paul?
I'm double checking now, and currently it's all members and staff, so no one that I would think would wish to speak.
All right. Any staff that wants to speak at all? Anything they got to say? If not, we'll just continue moving through it. If nobody wants to speak, then how about we get a motion for our approval of minutes?
I'll move that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
Super. We got a first and a second from Councilor Moe and a second by Councilor Groves. All those in favor signify with a hand raise or an aye. All right, good, passes. Let's move along. We're looking good. We are doing well already. All right, we got a few information items today. Our regional transportation plan, Kelly's going to be doing all of that kind of stuff for us to update us on. There's a thing in your packet that we read that I wanted to bring your attention to. Maybe Kelly might do that too. There's these 7 goals and objectives here that the plan outlines. And I guess the question while we're discussing this and hearing Kelly's presentation is, is there other items that we want to include? I mean, sometimes we do that at the danger of making things too cumbersome, but there has been on your page some discussion about the ecological function, some sort of native forest land discussion, or some little bit more objectives to the resiliency. Or any other goals and objectives you might want to add. So just kind of bear that in mind too. I do have something here that I wanted to say on this matter. I got too many sheets here going here at once. Anyway, there was, oh, here it is. There was, Kelly, I'm going to embarrass you just for a second because you never brag about yourself. So being chair of the MPC committee, I get the microphone for a few minutes. So I Google stalked you and found out something about you I thought was really impressive. So I wanted to share that with the group because you're going to be talking most of today. And I want to say that this is on your LinkedIn page. Someone quoted you, or I quoted them rather. And they said that Kelly exhibits a calmness in the face of challenges. She never lets unforeseen obstacles shake her confidence in achieving her goals. And I thought, gosh, we are blessed to have someone like that in our organization. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to you. And I thought that was just a really great quote about who you are. And I wanted to share that with the group. So if you're not too blushed and ready to give us the information on our regional transportation plan, you have the floor, ma'am.
That is the best intro I've ever had. Thank you, Chair. Now I have to go update my LinkedIn page because I haven't even opened that for quite some time. So
I was going to say that it does have some neglected issues, but there you
go. So gloss past that, I guess. So now I have to be calm because that's my intro. Yeah, and thank you, Chair, for oh, Paul, actually, I have a presentation if we can share my screen.
Kelly, you should be able to share now.
Okay. Get to that. PowerPoint. Share. Okay, are we good on the PowerPoint? Because can't do a presentation without a PowerPoint. Yeah, so I will be talking today about the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plans, goals and objectives. And we've been before you quite a bit with this topic, and now we're kind of easing into the phase of refining or relooking at our goals and objectives and kind of right-sizing them as needed. And Ellen Courier is here as well, and she may have additional things to correct me on as I move forward with this. So the goals and objectives, like any good plan, they really set the framework for all of the other elements to follow. And another element that we have to think about is the federal required performance-based planning and programming, which is out of the FAST Act and MAP 21 legislation. And what it does is requires that our goals and objectives are tied to our investments, and then that we're tracking progress along the way. And so these are an important part of the framework from that perspective as well. We do need to support the federal goals and planning factors, and I'm not going to read all of these, but you'll see that they really make a lot of sense. I think locally, even for us, they resonate. But they're here for your reference and in the packet as well. And then what we did with the last RTP update that we adopted, that MTC adopted in January 2020, was a really robust effort to reestablish the RTP's goals and objectives. And that was through an awful lot of public involvement and conversations with stakeholders and MPC. And what we have are the goals that are on the screen now. So it's transportation choices, safety, security, and resiliency, healthy people and environment, equity, economic vitality, reliability and efficiency, and system asset preservation. And NPC at the time supported these goals, but they did not want to prioritize them. So these each are all standalone, equally weighted goals that are just listed in this order for no reason other than we needed a list. And each of the goals has a set of objectives, and oftentimes one objective will support more than one goal. And so this is a really busy slide, but attempts to link a lot of things together. So under the objectives, you'll see that there are numbers after it. Those numbers show what goals they support, even though this is under Goal 5, economic vitality. Some of these objectives, like increasing the number of households and areas of employment with access to current and planned frequent transit service, bicycle network, and walk network, will support other goals. So we wanted to make sure that those links are shown. This slide and these cut sheets are in your packet memo as well. Show the performance measures that we have set up to measure these goals, and they show how they're connected to the federal planning factors and national planning goals. So it's a lot to take in, nothing to memorize here, but just to show kind of our attempt to kind of link all of these things together. Each of the 7 goals has a cut sheet like this, just for not wanting to walk through each one with you because I don't want to read to you in a meeting. They're available for you to read. We'll be back in the future MPC meetings to go over these, but this is an option or opportunity to start the conversation with you today. We will be beginning kind of a more robust public engagement effort starting soon. We have been going through a contracting process to hire and to get our consultant to help us with this under contract. That contract was signed last week, and our consultant is Zan Associates. We're really excited to work with them. I think they'll bring a nice fresh perspective and be able to add extra technical capacity for our team. They're working on developing the project website. We kind of have a placeholder website, in place, but this will be something more forward, public facing. And one of the first things that they'll be working on is developing the online open house that we'll use to solicit feedback for these goals and objectives, and other things for the RTP as well. It'll be based on the public online open house that we used at the last RTP. We like the idea of continuity so people know what to expect from us and get to know who we are a little bit more. But we'll be asking questions about how the transportation system is working for people today. We'll have an interactive map so that people can share ideas and concerns about the system. And then we'll be asking them to share what kinds of priorities and what kind of projects they think we should think about in the future. And then just an opportunity for open feedback as well. And so that will happen through beginning of next calendar year. We're into 2025 already, even though that middle number I see says 2024. And then we'll be drafting up the goals and objectives and performance measures and bringing them back to you in subsequent MPC meetings, but hopefully for your final kind of look and approval in March of 2025. But we, throughout that whole process, appreciate any thoughts that you have on it, as well as Chair Lovell has mentioned. We did want to bring to you some of the recommendations that we have internally as staff, and these are kind of coming from a point of, we've had the opportunity to reflect on the goals and objectives since they were adopted in 2020. And then we've also been busy with a lot of things around implementing the RTP. For example, we've gotten the Resilient Lane Protect grant, and we've done an invest evaluation. And if I don't know if you remember, that invest evaluation allowed us to look and audit the RTP from kind of a triple bottom line sustainability lens, and there's some recommendations that came out of that. And so then the last thing I guess that we've reflected on is that again mentioning that performance-based planning and programming framework and ways to strengthen that since we implemented it in the last RTP. So the first recommendation that we have are to add one or more objectives that more explicitly support ecological function. And we have some suggestions and examples here that we could use to do that. We don't have to do them all, but there's some options here. The one that would have the most carryover for all the goals is that second one. Incorporating nature-based solutions where feasible to mitigate the impacts of transportation on ecosystems, improve resiliency, and support active transportation. That's one example. And we can kind of revisit these as we're getting more into the discussion here. Staff recommendation 2 is to add one or more objectives to address resiliency. You'll see that carry over from the nature-based solutions. Some of these will have similar types of language. But again, it's just to look at, strengthening that resiliency component of the RTP. And our third recommendation is to develop a vision statement to inform the development of goals and objectives. We realize, vision statements are really important, and our RTP lacks one. So we recommend developing one for this RTP update. And then for the next steps, as I mentioned, we'll be publishing the project website. We'll have an online open house available for the public and as much feedback as we can get through that. And then we'll be reporting back to MPC in November and subsequent meetings. That's all I have for the official presentation. I'm not looking and I'm not asking for any official votes from the MPC at this moment, but just any thoughts or comments that you might have, or any specific staff direction direction you have for staff here.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Kelly. Does anybody else have any comments? Mayor Venice, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I really just want to thank you for this. A couple of things. I think when we approved the RTP, we were a little frustrated that there hadn't been enough time for public engagement. So I really appreciate you sort of coming out and looking at that broadly. And then I think the other question that we had was really around, so much of the work we're doing is around alternative transportation. We're very cognizant of, the GHG impacts of the transportation system. And so I appreciate the sort of trying to drill down on a little bit more on the nature-based solutions and so on. I have a couple of questions about it. And the first is in terms of the public engagement, you're asking people around the transportation system and how it works and so on. I also wonder if there isn't a question there around, do they understand our materials? Because I think, one of the challenges, you're just looking at those sheets and saying this is too much for people. It's too much for us to wade through. It's too much to understand. And maybe the process of the vision statement will help that. But I don't know whether in some of that public engagement, there might be a question about how do you want to hear this information, right? What makes it understandable to you? So, you know, I don't know whether this is sort of a dashboard function, but I think we should really be thinking about that, about how do we package this in a sort of easier to grasp, less intense way. And attached to that is a sort of a question about how do we measure success? Like, what is the benchmark that says we've done the work we set out to do? And again, we might address that partly in the vision statement, but I don't know how you quantify that. Do you quantify that by the grant dollars spent? I mean, and if you're using a triple bottom line sort of evaluation, how are we actually going to do that in a way in which we can say, yes, we have this vision for ourselves about this transportation system, particularly about its resiliency and viability in light of growing population and in light of the impacts of climate change and our need to reduce how do we, and I don't know what those benchmarks would look like, but that feels like a question, and maybe that's even a question for the public. Like, what information would tell you this is working? What information would tell us it's working? So I don't have the answer to that, but it feels like that's something that this committee could sort of chew on a little bit, and that maybe the public engagement, there's a way of framing that there. And I'm all in on the vision statement. I think that's a really important thing, and it takes time to do that, but I think that's a really important thing, because it feels to me that as separate jurisdictions, as we come up with different lists of projects, we need a way to distill that down and say, how are we looking at these big lists of projects, and do they align with sort of our regional goals? And without you know, so we're looking at our own jurisdiction's recommendations and requests around projects and saying, does this align with our sort of regional goals? And that feels to me that that's been the sort of tricky landscape for us to navigate. And I think the vision statement and benchmarks might help us with that.
Super, good points. Anybody else? Anybody got any
Yeah,
bright ideas of how to start that vision statement?
May I respond to Mayor Venice?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I appreciate your comments, Mayor Venice. Thank you. And I appreciate your involvement in the last one to know where we're coming from. As far as understanding our materials, we'll work really hard to make sure that they're front facing and public approachable. This I definitely recognize that what we shared in this presentation, this PowerPoint wasn't there, but it was more of an intent to kind of show how we are as staff trying to make some linkages with all of these things. So we felt like the last online open house that we did do was very clear and public facing, but we are lucky to have a really good consultant, I think, to help us with that as well, with fresh eyes. They are actually based in Minneapolis, but have an office now in Portland, and I've been in Portland for a couple of years, and I've done local Oregon projects, but I think we'll have some really fresh eyes and perspective that we can benefit from. So we're really excited about that. My dog is playing with a squeaky toy, I'm sorry.
I thought that was a shoulder joint there for a minute, Kelly.
Oh, I hope not. No, squeaky toy. And then as far as measuring success, the RTP does have my apologies. The RTP does have performance measures and associated targets that we adopted with the last RTP, and again, part of that performance-based planning and programming framework. We have the opportunity to evaluate those and see if are they still the right measures and targets, and we'll be talking about that in upcoming meetings too. And then thank you for the support on the vision statement. Oh, as far as getting that started, we've thrown out a couple kind of starter vision statements that felt we talked about with our advisory committee. They felt way too wonky and didn't want to bring those to MPC as a start. Just felt like we're not there yet. We haven't done the outreach to get the kind of the direction and priority. But we will kind of continue to think about like what a good vision statement is, what do we want to do with it, and what is it, what is its purpose, and how is it useful for us moving forward with the RTP. So we'll be bringing that forward again in a future conversation.
Thank you for all that. I want to just plant one other seed. Did the MPC create a youth advisory council? Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah. Okay. That feels like a really important stakeholder group. And I have a mayor's youth advisory council, and one of the members of my youth advisory council is also on that MPC. So there's a possibility for another in your engagement of a wider crossover if you want to reach out to the youth opinion.
That youth opinion might also help us of where we can place our messages to get our communications out better. That was one of my questions is, what is our digital footprint or our print footprint or whatever footprint we have out in the community to communicate what we're doing. Obviously, I think that's going to have to shift a little bit going forward.
I can chime in on that, Paul, if you want, or did you want to say something first?
Ellen, go ahead. I was going to refer to some of the responses from our public participation plan survey.
Okay. Yeah, I think just to expand a little bit on the online open house, you might recall a couple of months ago, we came and talked about the public engagement strategy, but the online open house is really kind of the place where we're going to orient people towards, but that's not the only touch point. So we'll be doing physical outreach in the community. We'll be doing direct mailers for people that may not come into contact through our regular outreach program. So we're going to be kind of funneling all of those outreach activities to the online open house so that we can gather their input, but we'll be out in the community talking to people. We'll be doing mailers so that we can try to make sure that we get representation from all different populations in our community. And then one thing that we did last year was we did kind of a first round of the online open house, and we looked at what sort of responses we had, and then we did very specific outreach to try to meet the gaps that we saw in that outreach that we've done. So I think we'll be doing all of those suggestions that you had, and we'll welcome any others that you have as well.
Paul, did you want to add anything to that? Your hand's still up.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I was, as I said, going to refer to our public participation plan, which you recently approved a new plan. And as part of that, we did a survey. It turned out to be statistically valid. One of the questions asked in there is which method would be most effective for basically engaging people and letting them provide input. And very clearly, the top three responses were all around the electronic platforms, social media, websites, electronic subscription lists, at 30 or 40% higher, preferring those three methods of reaching them. Way down the list at less than 5% were some of the things that we used to do, like in-person workshops. So we definitely need to focus more on that sort of outreach, the online open house, and we'll continue to do that, but we'll also still have some in-person opportunities and touch points. Mayor Venice, you're correct. One of the things that was, I think, identified in that same survey, not necessarily directly, but you spoke to the complexity of what we're doing and the difficulty in understanding it. One of the top responses to barriers from participation in the MPO process was just not knowing how to do it and not knowing much about the information. So we do need to work on that.
Thank you, Paul. One of the things that when Mayor Venice was talking and Ellen was talking as well, I had this vision in my head about where I normally go when I'm not on a street. I'm on a bike trail or I'm stopped at a pub near a bike trail head or something. And I'm wondering if MPC couldn't look at trying to have like little poster things or little table tents on some restaurants with a barcode on it where people could go as they're sitting there and get information while they're sitting there. It occurred to me that, while I'm doing the activities that support MPC Works, I would probably be more curious to know what's going on than I would just, trying to schedule a meeting on a Thursday in the middle of my normal work week. I don't know. Any thoughts to that, Mayor Venice?
Actually, no, I was going to change direction, so I apologize. I'll wait and see if others weigh in on that.
Okay.
But I like the idea.
Yeah, I like that idea too. And one of the main tools that we're hoping to use for outreach is kind of our programmatic wing of our transportation planning work. So you probably are all familiar with our May is Bike Month work, our Walktober work, and those are more community-based oriented fun activities, and they're, bringing people who are new to those kinds of transportation modes. So we're going to be partnering with those programmatic staff to do outreach around some of these topics. But I do like the restaurant table tent idea. We have not thought of that.
Super. All right, Mayor Venice, change directions for us.
Yeah, sorry, just another thought, piggybacking on in response kind of to what Paul just said about the high preference for electronic, social media kind of surveys that we do know, in terms of reaching out to underserved communities, that is not necessarily the most efficient way to reach them. So I would just caution, I mean, the city of Eugene has developed equity panels, and we've made special efforts to provide childcare and provide food and, sort of schedule those carefully. So just those underserved communities need a little more support in order to participate.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Just in general, before we go off this topic and move on to the other items on the agenda, I just had kind of a general question, being kind of new here. A lot of you have been here for a lot longer than I have, obviously, is like, who is our inspiration if we had to pick somebody? I mean, you always hear bits and pieces of saying, well, in Sweden they do this, or in Denmark they do this. And, I've traveled in those places, and of course, they're very different cultures. Even the East Coast, let's face it, is a different culture than the West Coast. I mean, they look at us like, why don't you have trains everywhere like they do on the East Coast? So I'm just kind of wondering in this group, what or who or what international model is kind of our inspiration that we're gravitating to, that I guess, could better explain that to the people that I'm in conversation with. Does anybody have any input on that idea, or should we just say the chair's kind of wacky and we should just move on?
The chair is kind of wacky. And
Okay.
So, Commissioner, what I would think is that a lot of our work has been it's been bottom up type work, right? It's sort of gluing together the work the jurisdictions are doing. So I don't know that I could come up with or pick out a name that said our inspiration, for all of Lane County is so and so. But I'd be interested in other people's takes. But like most of this always has felt to me like, the cities and the county are sort of driving it up into the regional plan.
Yeah, I just was kind of just thinking, if I'm going to sail somewhere, I kind of want to know what port I'm headed towards, so I know if I can make those markers to keep me from going into the rocks. So yeah, just a thought from me, but if just kind of gargle that around in your molars and see what you got. Paul.
I'm going to take a different approach. Over the last couple of decades, I think we've been the inspiration. Lane Transit District did the first BRT in the United States. I know that our MPO was the first one that I know of to share some of our funding for local staffing and local efforts and local participation, which we've been doing for a long time. I know that ODOT and again, the Central Lane MPO and many of your jurisdictions have led the way on some of these things.
Huh, interesting. All right, well, good. Thank you for that input. Any other comments or discussion to this item? Vidal, you have your hand up?
Yes. I was going to simply say, in terms of inspiration, everything is unique. Everything has its uniqueness or some quality that makes it stand out from everything else. And Lane County, and actually every member here, is no different. And so when we think about, or at least when I think about that inspiration, it's me looking at that uniqueness and how could I contribute my own uniqueness to that uniqueness that we're all trying to achieve. And again, I want to probably second what Mayor Van Gordon said. When I look at a lot of textbook, when I look at a lot of stuff, other states are doing this, other cities and locales are doing this and so forth, and you're always trying to piggyback off of them if you can. But the truth is, the difference really comes from you actually taking the action to do something. So that's your individual uniqueness that actually helps make things move forward. That's just my thoughts on it.
Good, excellent. Thank you for your thoughts. Anyone else? All right. right. Well, thank you for your input. I appreciate that very much. Kelly, thank you again. So let's move down to Vidal, who's in my upper left square, ready to give us our ODOT update. Take it away, Vidal.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a whole lot, but I have a couple of items I could share with everyone here. I think on the top of the list, if you all recall, our Oregon 126 Benita to Eugene project that it's been in the works for many years. Just want to say that we have finally completed our environmental package or environmental work on it. FHWA finally signed off on the document. I believe it was late August, early September. That positions us to, actively seek funding if that makes sense to you. That's so what I'll probably do, Paul, maybe in an email or something, I can send the link to you where if members would like to look at that document or know more about that project, they could actually go right there and find it. Since the last time we met, we've got a new division administrator or highway division administrator. Macklin no longer works for ODOT. He's been replaced with Amy Ramsdale, or Ramsdell, I believe it is. And she actually comes from our Commerce and Compliance division, taking on the role as a highway division administrator. We also have another new assistant director. Her name is Serena Studemeyer Wesley. That's our new diversity, equity, and inclusion assistant director coming in for us. So again, we're hoping that both of them could kind of pick up things where things have left off and then continue moving the agency forward in a lot of things that new that we're either trying to do, implement, or what's not, programs and so forth. The last time the OTC met was back in August. I believe they had 2 other meetings after that, but it's mostly been the West Coast Commissioners meeting, and then they also attended I believe it was a bi-state commission meeting with the state of Washington. And so at the last AC meeting, Lane AC, chair and vice chair, we just presented our work plan. That's the only local thing that kind of transpired, at least for that meeting, so to speak. As you all know, that the legislative tours have wrapped up. I believe the last ones were late September. They visited throughout the state, going in various locations and so forth. And so that has wrapped up, and at least what I'm hearing right now, the next steps are for them to kind of put together all of the voices and comments that they've heard, and then also to start forming some work groups or to work around some of the comments, some of the suggestions, some of the thoughts and so forth that they've heard throughout the state. I'm understanding the work groups are going to be targeted work groups. At least that's what I'm hearing. Although it's all transportation related, but they may have an emphasis on, one may have an emphasis on safety, one may have an emphasis on homelessness, one may have an emphasis on, something like multimodal. Again, I don't know all the categories, I don't know all the names, but I'm hearing about 8 different work groups going to be put together somewhere thereabout to kind of help move things further as they move forward. And so that's all that I have for us today. And I'm happy to take any questions if there are. One last thing. I do recall October 17th, there is I think that the group name is Crescent. They're having a meeting over at the, oh my, it's slipping me. I'm trying to remember what it was about. I know it's over at the university, or at least one of the museums over there. And it's going to be a conversation around resiliency here in Lane County specifically. I could try to send the contact information to Paul again, and Paul can share that out with everyone. Again, the conversation will be about resiliency here in Lane County. Resiliency as a result of, like, the big one comes, big earthquake comes, maybe even a tidal wave of some sort. But then again, I think that's very good conversation around what at least the MPC has had some concerns around, listening to what this local community or this county is actually doing around trying to be prepared, or at least understanding what could happen or what to do when the big one comes. And again, I can share that information with Paula. It may take me a little while to kind of research it, but it's October 17th, I believe. And I think it's at the Children's Museum. A group out of the University of Oregon is actually sponsoring that. And I am going to be one of the participants in there. So happy if any of you have time and you'd like to join, that'd be great.
Awesome, good info. Thank you, Vidal. Anybody got any questions or comments for him? I can only imagine what that 126 Veneta environmental heavy lift was about. I mean, you're going through how many miles of wetlands and lake and all of that? Holy moly, good for you, good job.
It definitely is a big, huge lift. I think, what, 10 years in the making, about four years just to get everything cobbled together, and about another year and a half or maybe 2 years just to get signatures. Again, it's a big one. And FYI to everyone too, like I said, we are looking for different grant opportunities. And we have one that we actually been eyeing on, that we actually already put the grant together to submit for it. But again, I don't have any information on it, et cetera, et cetera. But that project is so huge that it can't be done in one swoop. It's sort of like the Beltline. We're taking it on in phases, or at least the approach is to do it in phases. So this one here is the same way. You kind of cobble it together piece by piece and just keep moving progressively. And just as a reminder, that corridor 126, it's been a concern for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, all the way to Florence is a concern, to be honest with you. But again, the big push is because we know that the concerns along that corridor needs to be addressed. Obviously, we can't do it today, but if you, over time, keep putting in one nail at a time, at some point, you'll get enough nails in there where it's going to hold together.
You'll nail it, so to speak. No puns intended.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let's move on to our transportation improvement plan handout that you had in your packet. Anybody have any questions on those items that are listed in there? There's only a few. Seeing none, let's move on back to Kelly Show on our Metropolitan Transportation, our CFEC informational packet about our climate-friendly, equitable communities report. And Kelly's loading up her PowerPoint. I would imagine there's a PowerPoint. I'm excited to see the PowerPoint.
I only have one slide. I'm going to hold it to the end as like a grand finale.
Wow, look at that. Fireworks at the end. All right, Kelly, go ahead. Thank you.
And I'm here with Cody Meyer with the Division of Land Conservation Development. And Brian, were you able to get in? Brian Hurley with ODOT?
Yes. Hello, Kelly. Brian Hurley with the ODOT Climate Office. Zoom is giving me some trouble, so I'm staying off camera to be safe.
Oh, bummer. Okay. Well, thanks for joining, both of you. So the last time MPC met was August, is that right? And we presented the climate-friendly, equitable communities draft performance measures that we are required to establish as part of the new legislation for CFEC. And during that presentation, several questions came up around what do these targets mean with performance measures? What do these targets mean? What are the consequences if we don't meet them? Questions around that. And so we wanted to address those here with you today and bring in the experts to be able to answer any questions that might still come up. So the questions were, are there any consequences for not meeting performance measure targets? And there's not necessarily consequences, but there will be, some procedures to go through to identify corrective actions that we can, as a region, implement to move forward to start meeting those targets. And Cody and Brian, if there's anything you want to add to any of this, please just jump in. Otherwise, I can just move forward. Is there a potential to change a target if it's not being met? The rules do allow for changes to the scenario plan and performance measures and targets. we were advised that the kind of the corrective action process might be more of a recommended way to go with that. And what is the major report approval and hearing process? How does that work? So there's some steps that Cody provided in your packet. But basically the reporting agencies will submit a report to DLCD after the RTP is adopted, and the RTP will be adopted hopefully November 2025. The department will review that report for completeness. The report is deemed complete, or if it is deemed complete, there's an open comment period. And the department then reviews the major report and either issues an order approving the report or refers the report to the commission for a compliance hearing. Hopefully we will get to that point. And the orders approving the report may be appealed to the commission. So there's kind of a, step after step in case something goes awry. And then MPC had asked if the project team could provide MPC with a few bullet points or a cheat sheet that could be used to help communicate what is going on with CFEC to the public or anyone who is interested. And here's where I'm going to share my screen. We have some bullet points to share, a little lengthy, but thought we would start here. So what this is intended to do is start kind of by providing a little bit of context with a little bit of history of how we got to where we are. And so it's going back to in 2025 when our region, which included Coburg, Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County, developed a central lane scenario plan. And that plan was intended to respond to GHG emission reduction targets passed by legislation, passed by the state. That plan had explored different ways to cut down GHG emissions from transportation to meet the target that was set for 2035, and was developed with help from local officials and community members, and resulted in what was called a preferred scenario. And that preferred scenario had specific strategies that everyone agreed to reduce emissions, including supporting active transportation and transit, and relying on parking fees to kind of disincentivize parking, things like that. Recently, the state adopted new climate-friendly equitable communities rules that reinforce the need to make progress towards the emission target. So we had this plan in 2015 that was with the preferred scenario, but nothing that gave it teeth, nothing that gave it any like implementing requirements. And now that's what we're coming back and doing, is adding those performance measures and targets to show that we are tracking towards what we said we would be doing. To meet the CFEC rule requirements, our region is now updating that plan with the implementation strategies and developing local and regional performance measures that will help track progress. So kind of what I just said. And then when complete in early 2025, Coburg, Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County will have a set of measures that meet those requirements to track and report progress on, as well as refreshed approaches to reducing emissions from transportation. So we will, accept any thoughts you have on this, or if anything, any or additional information would be helpful in talking with any stakeholders or public who may be interested. We can evolve this, but we will send this out for your use as needed.
Thank you, Kelly. Mayor Venus, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to keep this all in my head, but this really relates to the RTP. I mean, we're really leaning on our RTP for those performance standards to comply with the CFEC. Is that right?
We're trying to be as efficient as we can with performance measures that are coming at us from different sources. And so trying not to reinvent the wheel for every different source of performance measure requirement. So we have been able to use some of the RTP performance measures to be able to support the need for CFEC. There are some that will have to be able to report at the jurisdictional level, which the RTP is not doing. So we're evaluating and making sure that we can do that. There are also some recommendations from the transportation planning rule, which is the state's code, for lack of better words, that we're able to use a few of the examples from there and use draft performance measures from that source as well.
Okay, well, power to you. That sounds complicated. but
I'd love the accountants.
yeah. Yeah, and I guess you know, but it is helpful to have this lens in mind as we're looking at the RTP also, because we're really trying to make sure all of this aligns. And so I think going forward, even on the RTP, I mean, I appreciate that these two agenda items are on the same agenda today. And I would just say that's helpful, and that might be helpful going forward, is since there is an overlap.
Okay. Yeah, point taken. Thank you. And actually, to add on to that, that when this project returns to MPC in March, we'll be talking about RTP performance measures. So that alignment and that synergy is actually, well, will work out well. And I'm glad to hear that it's helpful and not overly confusing. And if I may add one more thing, unless there's any other questions, one thing that I forgot to mention.
Oh, I've got one, but you can go ahead.
Okay. The initial date for submitting our implementation plan was end of this calendar year, so December 2024. And that date is being just to give us time to complete the work, will now be March of 2025. So we'll be submitting an amended work plan with that new date.
Mayor Coburg, yes. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. This may be a really silly question, but it's one I have to ask. What is defined as a short trip?
I think it's a trip that you could take walking or biking. So that's kind of our definition for like where you could see the most shift in how we're getting around, from taking, instead of a short trip by driving alone, maybe you could take that short trip by bicycle.
Okay, because basically here in Coburg, that means if we're going in Coburg, because if we're going somewhere else, that's not any longer a short trip. So just checking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That would probably be dependent on who you'd ask. If you ask an ultra marathon, or a short trip might be a marathon. So, you know, there you go. You got to have your audience on that one.
Yeah, well, not if you're going to get groceries.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're not going to carry groceries clear back from Coburg Road.
Probably not.
Oh, good point. Hey, just out of curiosity, Kelly, if we, and my stats could be wrong, so correct me, if we have a county that's kind of plateauing on its growth, if not shrinking in some population numbers, how is it that, in light of Mayor Venus's question, how is it that the accountants can really know if we're reducing our greenhouse gases based on usage, or if they're just coming down based on population loss? How do we separate that?
Cody, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Well, I'll take this question. So Cody Meyer, Land Use Transportation Planner with DLCD. The greenhouse gas targets are set for per capita. So we're looking at like the rates of driving per person. And so when the population grows or shrinks, it's really the average amount of driving or, you know, mode share per person.
So that'll be accounted for as population shifts, is what you're saying, Cody?
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
gotcha. All right, super good. Thank you for that answer. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Any other comments? Wow, look at that. Kelly, you did a great job today. Thank you for your resilient challenge attitude and getting to the goals. That's the end of the meeting almost. Good job. So if there's any other information or discussion that the MPC members need to have, this is a good time to do that. If not, we're nearing the close of the meeting, where our next meeting is November 7th. If there's no other comments, I do have a quick story for you that I want to share. My doctor friend had an 80-year-old couple come into his office. They were celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary, and he said, wow, that's quite a legacy, 60 years. And the man humbly replied, he says, look, my wife and I early on determined that I would make the living and she would make the living worthwhile. So my encouragement for you is to go make your living worthwhile. So that's the end of our meeting. We're now adjourned from the NPC. Have a great day, y'all.